Blue Protocol is set to launch here in just a few days now, and after my recent videos, it seems like a lot of you want some day 1 priorities, what you should be focusing on for that, as well as even week 1 and month 1. We'll go over some of the time-locked rewards and what you really shouldn't miss, as it can set you back a little bit even with the time gating. We'll cover the min-max day 1 routes, as well as priorities, early unlocks, currencies, even a mini FAQ. We got a ton to talk about. What's up, World Utopia here, back with another video. Today we're checking out all things Blue Protocol. Okay, so first up, we'll go over the quick start, the day 1 route, what you should really be focusing on and pushing to make sure you get everything in order so that you don't fall behind. Again, this is for the real min-maxers here. If you want to play your own way, you of course can. You can still utilize some of these tips in your day-to-day play, even if you want to focus on other things like story or casual play, just to make sure you have everything in order. The first one is fairly obvious, but it's just to push your main story. Honestly, you don't even need to look at your gear, you don't need to upgrade a single ability, you will get through the campaign incredibly easy. Literally, you might even be able to use the autoplay at this point to get through the campaign if you really wanted to, and you honestly could AFK through it. It is incredibly easy and you don't need to upgrade or look at any of your skills. In fact, I did not do any of those. The reason being is I was actually over a week late to get into the beta, and I only had a few days to prep everything that I wanted to have all the footage, as well as my previous build guides up. So yeah, never upgraded my gear. I did put on new pieces when I got them. I do believe you get a few blue pieces in the campaign. Just push through the main story as fast as possible until you maybe get a Terra Resonance quest, which is from Ariana. That way you can traverse a bit easier. I will mention here, at the end of the campaign, I had around 200 to 250k Luno. Had that asked in one of my previous videos, do you need to get Luno like crazy, farm it up? You should not need to farm any Luno, especially if you either A, get the battle pass, which I didn't have at that time, or B, focusing on the skills that you actually like. To be fair, you should be able to max out nearly all of them anyways with just the campaign currency. At least that's what it felt like nearly. On top of that, I'll go over that in a bit, but obviously stuff from the currency shops. That's in-game currency though, not spent currency, so not bought with cash. Of course, that brings me to my next one here, Daily Commission. This will help you get some bound Luno, honor coins, reputation, and even gearing at the end of the week. So make sure you're visiting your guild to do guild attendance, or even doing the daily attendance in the starter area. Unfortunately, I can't find any footage of this. I might be able to find it in my editing process, but there's just a simple NPC, you talk to them, and you get your attendance for the day. Other than that though, there is something called the Pioneer Award. That's going to reward you for the Chaotic Realms, World Wilderness, and the life skills. So you'll see here, after reset and at the end of the week, you will be allowed to select 2 of these items. I will preface though, you cannot select the same reward twice, meaning reforged stones here, you cannot pick 2 of them, or gear, you cannot pick 2 pieces of gear. What you can do is pick reforged stones and a piece of gear. You can also pick any 2 on the same track, as long as they're different from each other. So things like here, life skill, you need 1800 stamina consumed to get all 3. For the World Wilderness, you need to have defeated 12 elite bosses to get all 3 there. Again, those are options though. You don't get all 9 of these rewards. You can select 2 from this sheet. Again, they have to be different from each other, but they can be on the same track. So you'll see here, I did select the same 2 on the Chaotic Realm, and I was able to do so. Make sure you're doing all that per week, but also slightly focusing on that day 1. I would say more than likely you shouldn't even worry about it in the first day or 2. However, it is something to keep in mind. One thing here though is you should be using your boss keys for the world elites. Those will actually refresh daily. There's going to be world bosses that you can farm. I would do those in tandem with your campaign, especially if you needed a certain wish or imagine. You could start your farm and should start your farm day 1. That way you're spending through your keys every single day. Don't worry, they refresh the next day. This next one goes in tandem with the previous section, which was that Commissions Pioneer Award page. You should be using your daily stamina. That's so you'll help hit that week 1 target of 1800 focus. So if you can, try to grab a life skill day 1. Again, a lot of good ones, and what my guild has pointed out is gemology, as well as mineralogy that goes in tandem with those 2. You're going to need a lot of resources from these other ones as well, but those do mostly coincide with each other because you can mine and then use those in gemology, which you can then slot into your gear for a little bit of bump increase in your ability score. Now also, of course, in tandem there, you should be buying out the daily shops. Sometimes they'll be weekly, sometimes they'll be daily. You should really snag those daily ones as early and as soon as you can. There's a bunch of different shops here, from the Reclaim Hub to the seasonal points, as well as just using your Luno or even bound resources. So make sure, I know there's a ton of different menus, but make sure you're clicking through all of them and seeing any of the shops that you can get from. Again, this is with in-game currency, not bought currency. I would also slightly focus on this one day 1, or even really week 1, but you should look into the trading post. Most of the resources are going to cost quite a bit that week 1 and even into week 2. After that point, the prices will kind of either stagnate or slide down so much that the resources aren't that valuable to you. You might get a little bit less from what I noticed in MMOs day 1, day 2, and maybe even day 3. Come day 4 though, the trading post will probably hit a lot of its peak because a lot of people will get that generated resource. Because the game is essentially generating currency for you constantly, at least during that first few weeks there, people getting through the campaign, they are getting the most amount of resources that they'll ever get. So they're going to be spend happy and overspend. So try to be looking at trade posts and sell what you don't need, especially those skill books. Those are going to be rare and very sought after, especially by people that just want to pay to get it early. Yeah, I would throw those up as soon as you can if you don't need the ones that you get. Maybe wait until day 2 or day 3 even, but those should go up very early. Moving on here, we'll go to the week 1 stuff here as we move into the multi-day segment. My opinion, if you are a free-to-play player and you don't plan to spend anything in the game, or you're very limited on what you spend, you should hoard rose orbs and everything early. Do not spend your rose orbs on those cosmetics, especially the bound one, because those will be limited and you will get a plethora at the beginning. Now you might say, well, if I'm getting so many, why wouldn't I spend them? Well, because you might overspend and then realize you're not going to get that much later game. Especially when you're claiming everything, you're like, oh my god, there's so much currency, I'm getting it from here and here and here. Eventually that does stop, so just hoard while you can, spend on the gear and items that you need to push that, then you can worry about fashion later. But if you don't really care about gearing, if you don't care about the end game, of course, feel free to spend what you want to do. Not here to tell you how to play the game, just for those that want to min-max. Obviously, you're free to do with whatever you want to do with your Rose Orb. Speaking of that, I might be doing some giveaways here soon over on my Discord for those, so do watch out for that. Speaking of week 1 stuff, I know I did mention checking in with your guild attendance and attendance. More than likely, you won't have the guild attendance for the first week or so. That does take time for you to level up. Just be wary on that, but eventually you should be buying out of the guild token shop. So buy those weekly mats if you can, and if you do have those available to you. And then also checking in when your guild does have those levels. So it is very beneficial to join a guild if you can. I would look out for one week 1 as they're going to fill raid spots. So another tip there, you should definitely be looking out for a guild. I actually found one just by posting in general chat saying that I was new to the game and new to joining into the beta. And I did find a guild that I hopefully and more than likely will make my home for release. This next part also coincides with Luno and just building Luno and getting more of it. Again, you really shouldn't need to grind for it, but if you feel like you needed more Luno and the unbound Luno, you can get it by selling on the trade post. So as I mentioned earlier, you should be selling if you are not trying to pay to win. Your biggest opportunities and most Luno are going to be made week 1, maybe potentially into week 2. After that point though, it does become a little bit harder to actually build that resource, as everybody already has what they need, skill books, everything else. So there's going to be less buyers in the market and more sellers. So don't hoard those skill books, especially if you don't plan on playing another class or you don't plan on ulting anything very early. I would sell whatever class you're not using. Another thing here is you should be using any free will wish coins that you can get week 1. That's the sort of quote-unquote gotcha that you can play in this game. Other than cosmetic, that is the only other one that you can technically get power with via gacha. It is those imagines that you can summon. I would try to get as many of those as you can week 1 so you're powerful early, and that way you don't have to spend or waste time farming bosses that you really didn't need to. Or at least you know which ones to prioritize later if you do have a certain amount of those summons. Now there is one last thing I wanted to talk about during this video. This doesn't really pertain to tips or the day 1 or week 1 route. However, I get asked it every single video. When is the release time and the release date? The release date we have officially is October 9th. However, the release time has still not been disclosed, but we do have some sort of official placeholder for right now. So if we actually link to the official Steam database, we can look at here, it says the release date is October 9th at 12 UTC. Might be wondering, what is UTC? It's just universal time, so if you see like -5 for your time zone or -6 like a lot of the NA places, that just means you take back from that time. But I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to put a little time code here and kind of showcase. I'll also link down below to a time converter so you can figure that out easily. But as we can see here for the times, it is 5 a.m. October 9th for Pacific time, 7 a.m. Central time, and 8 a.m. Eastern. A few other ones here for the UK, which is 1 p.m., as well as going all the way to New Zealand, which is 1 a.m. on October 10th. Again, this is a global release, so everybody should be able to play at the same time. Overall, it should be all covered for today's video. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and to the next one. Deuces.